Okay, welcome everybody to this first tutorial in programming with Cocos2dx and Android Studio. In this part we'll be showing you how to set up Android Studio, installing Python, and we'll be using the two libraries from Cocos2dx. We'll be using version 3 and version 4, and I'll be teaching you how to switch between both of them. Then we'll be having a little talk about emulation versus hardware, and then we shall be taking a little tour of the compiler a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, just to get around its environment, as I know it can be a bit daunting. But we'll take you all the way through the first project, and then we'll just show you the parts that you will be doing, and then at the end there's going to be a part 1.2, I think. And in that I shall be showing you how to install external libraries, i.e. fmod, or if you wanted to install SQL databases, or any other third-party libraries that you may want to install. So let's crack on with this first part of the tutorial. We're going to get to the downloading of what we need and the installation. Right here, right now, I have a fresh installation of Windows. There's nothing on it. There's nothing installed apart from OBS, and that's about it really. I've got these things over here which we'll come to later on, and command line is what we're going to be using to create our first project. So let's crack on with the downloading. So let's start the downloading procedure. Now I just googled these, jumped over to Google, and I literally typed in Android Studio and it gave me a link to this page straight away. So we're going to take the latest Android, which is Flamingo. Going to double click on that, say yes to the agreement or whatever it is, say yes and download that. We're going to head on over to Cocos2dx from there, or sorry, Cocos. Now, if you hit their landing page here, it's a link up here which says products, Cocos2dx. We're going to click on that, take us to their Cocos2dx page, and we scroll down to the bottom here, and then it says downloads. And click on there, and then it gives us a link to all of them. Now, as I said, we're going to be switching between both libraries, version 4 and version 3. The differences between version 3 and 4. In version 4, they remove the experimental part of Cocos, and also in version 4 they added Metal support for iOS and Mac, as I believe that's their new rendering system. So let's get those both downloading. So we'll take version 4 and we'll take version 3. So those are down. And the last part which we're going to come to is we want Python now to install our scripting for Cocos2dx. Now, when you reach the Python page here, please don't just download the version 3, as version 3 is incompatible with some of the scripting for Cocos2dx. We want the latest version of Python, version 2, sorry, of Python, which I believe is the 2 points. So if you scroll down a little bit, it'll give you all the different versions, and we're going to want 2.7.18. Any of the two versions will do. We don't want a 3 version. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to take the 64 installer, and then that's it. That's all we need for the downloading of our software. So if we go to our downloads here, we should have 4 different things. And now let's start the installation process. Right, now I know you can see that everything's installed, but I have to go right back to the beginning because this is for the AMD users. If you're on an Intel platform, you can go ahead and skip this part and go straight to the installation of everything and carry on. So again, this is for the AMD users only, and it's because we need to set something in the BIOS that you need to do before you start the installation of the Android Studio. And it's because of, if you want to run emulation and that, it's not going to run. If I try and run the emulation now, you can say it's going to moan about the hypervisor driver. Yeah, it just will not run. Intel to Hammy. I can go and install it and it's going to fail. Yeah, it's finished and it's done. Okay, right, okay. You see, we're in this vicious loop and that. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to try and run it again. You're going to see emulation just doesn't run. Now, I'll drop down to the BIOS and show you the settings you need to do. Again, this is for the AMD users, not for Intel. Intel, skip this step. You just go right ahead. Okay, so let's drop down to the BIOS. I'm going to use my cam on my phone because I need Windows to use OBS and we're not in an operating system. So we'll drop there now and do the settings. Now, to reiterate, this is for the AMD users only. If you're on an Intel system, again, totally skip this step. I'm sorry for the shakiness. As I said, I'm using this my phone as a thing. So what we need to set is we need to come to our OC settings. Yeah, and once we get into the OC settings, we need to go to the advanced configuration, and then there's this part here. You see where it says it's disabled? It's the SVM mode. This will allow you then, which says this, enable or disable CPU virtualization. So we need to enable that, and if we enable that and we drop out, quit without saving? No, I want to save. So make sure that you save the settings and the SVM mode in your overclocking part there is enabled. So I'm going to say yes to that. Then we just jump back into Windows and then if I run the Android Studio, yeah, now you'll see that when I click on the button here, oh, close that out, let it do that, initialize. Now if I run the emulation, you see now it says it's going to run the device and the device is running. So this is only for AMD users. You need to drop into your BIOS, turn on the SVM, the virtual devices there, CPU devices or whatever it was, and that's all you need to do for AMD in order for you to use or run emulation on the Android Studio. So now we'll move on to the actual installation process of all the software. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do in the installation process, I'll get that out the way, is we can install Android Studio. So we'll double click on that and get that setting up. We could be here sometime. Hope not. We've got a very speedy processor. Okay, so we're just going to click next, 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 and just install everything default as it is. Not too worried about anything at the moment. Pretty simple. It's just the next steps we're going to come to, where we're going to need to mosey about a little bit. Okay, next, we'll start it, and then we should have, don't import anything, I'm just going to start it up, don't send, I don't care, and then that's it, we're there. We can do a next, say standard for everything, Dracula, lovely, yeah, whatever, we're going to accept everything. On here, we're going to click the license as well, we're going to accept and finish. Let it do its updating and installing. Hopefully it's not going to take too long, maybe 20-30 seconds. It should be pretty quick, as I have a gigabit download and a gigabit up as well, as I'm using community fiber. No, what I might do is I might pause that. Oh, it's unzipping the 86 systems and that. It's downloading the emulations and that. Okay, come on. Right, I'll pause it and come back at the end of that. So I'm going through to the end, clicking another yes and a yes. You should get through to this where it says welcome to Android Studio. And that's about it really. That's the installation of Android Studio. Going to close that. Yep, there's nothing else to do there. So we'll move on to the next bit. Okay, so let's get the two Cocos libraries installed. I'm going to install them in my documents. So I'm going to right click on there and open in a new window. And in the My Documents, I'm just going to create a new folder called Programming. And I'm going to double click into there because that's where I'm going to install them. I'm going to double click on the zip and open it up. And I'm just simply going to drag and drop that into Programming. And then I shall pause that and come back towards the end, and then we'll do number 4. Just over halfway now. I'll come back towards the end. All right, lost a couple of percent. And then we're done. 98, 99, and done. So that's in there. And I should now have a directory that looks like that with the setup PY at the bottom there. Click back on Programming, we'll go back one, and we'll now do the same for 4. I'll double click in there and drag and drop number 4 into my programming directory in Documents. And again, I'll pause it right there and I'll come back. Just over the halfway mark now. Okay, that's it. So that's them both unpacked. We'll go back to our downloads now. So we should have both of them unpacked. I've got them here in my programming there, so it's a little bit neater rather than having 2 directories in there. It doesn't matter, you can install them wherever you want. But now we need to actually get the Cocos console installed, and we have to do that by installing Python. So we'll now move on to the Python and get that installed, and then we'll get either one of these libraries installed. Let's do that now. So we'll get Python installed. So we'll double click on Python, install for all users. I'm just going to leave everything default. I'm not going to mess with it at all. Right, now we're going to come through here where it says customize. Now, before you click next, don't. We need to come down here, see where this X is. We need to click into here, and we want to say entire features will be installed on the local drive. Once you've done that, clicked OK to that, then click next, and then just click next and yes, whatever. Let it do its thing, I guess. All right, and we're finished. Okay, so now we're going to check that Python is running correctly through the console, or Windows console. Let's do that now. So we can either get to the Windows console by pressing Windows key and R, which then brings up the run command, and then you type cmd. Or we can do it by simply coming down to the start button, right clicking and run, and the same thing, type cmd, and that will bring up the command console or DOS console, or it's now, I believe it's an emulated console, but either way we have a DOS prompt. And now we're going to test that Python's installed by simply typing python, and it should then tell us something like this, which then shows us what version we're running, and it's all installed. So we're going to Control C out of that, or you can just close the box down, and then next up we're going to get either version 3 or 4 of Cocos console installed so we can start creating our programs. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do that by, again, we're going to come down here, we're going to right click and run, and we're going to do a command, or Windows key R for run, and then type in cmd, and we're going to change directory to this directory over here. Now, rather than you doing a dir, I don't know if a lot of you know a lot about DOS prompts and commands and stuff like that. We would need to change to here documents and all that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to simply type cd, and then in Windows we're going to drag and drop the folder on there, and it will put the whole path in for us. Then we're going to hit enter, and if we do a dir, we can see there's a setup.py. Now this is what we're going to run with Python. So it's literally going to say pythonsetup.py. Yeah. Now there are some shortcuts. You can use the tab key. You can just literally type the first letter S and see what comes up, and hit the tab key. See how it fills it in for you? S and then the tab key, and it's filled it in. Just a couple of shortcuts, and this is some of the stuff from DOS years. Anyway, moving on. So we're going to type python setup.py, and we are going to come to this, and it's going to try and set it up. Now what we're going to do is we're not using any NDKs or anything like that, because this is the old route. We're using Android Studio, which is going to do all of this for us. So we're just going to do nothing more than just press enter and enter, and that's it. Now as it says please restart the terminal or the console to take effect. So we're going to close that down, right click or Windows key R, and we're going to type CMD again, and then now we're going to test the one of the Cocoses has been installed, and we can do that by typing cocos-v, and oh, I'm going to say yes to that, and it's going to tell us something like that. Cocos2dx version 4.0 is installed, and the console 2.3. So that's working fine. So next time we do that, it'll just tell us that. What we'll do now is we'll switch over to version 3, and we can then go between different libraries, and you'll see how to do that. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to cd, change directory. This time I'm going to drag this one here, Cocos, that one, change to there, and I'm going to type pyth python setup.py, and we're just going to say yes, yes, skip, 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 job done, restart the console, Windows key R, do that, and then Cocos -v, and now we should be running 3.17.2 and a Cocos console of 2.3. So those are the two libraries installed, and the Cocos console is now running. So now what we need to do is we now need to create our first project. So we're going to create the new project, and we're going to do that with this command line here. I'll leave it in the comments as well. You can type whatever you want, but I literally just typed into Google here and Cocos command line tool, and it should bring everything up, and it will explain how to create a new project. And it starts off with Cocos new, my game, yeah, then whatever you want to give it as your company or what have you, then the language, which we're saying C++, then D for directory. So that's what I've got here, so I can do that there. If you don't know where your directory is again, then you can pretty much type all of it out, and then space, and then I'm going to give it documents. So I'm going to drag documents there, and then it will put in the full path for you. Then if I hit enter on my documents, you can see it's creating a test1, and then that's our first project created. It's taking a bit of a while. It shouldn't take that long. It should only be a second. So all SSDs. I'll close that down and close that down, and we'll wait for that to just finish. All right, that's it done. So that's our first project created. So now we'll move on to how do we get it into Android Studio. Okay, so the way we get it into Android Studio is gonna click on here, and somewhere we should have Android Studio. We're gonna open that up. We're gonna close the console, and we're going to click on open, and now we're going to go to admin, and we're going to go to documents, and hopefully there should be a test 1 in here. If not, you can press this button to refresh. We're going to click on the test 1, and then you should see this thing that says Android. We're going to click on it. We don't want to click in it, we don't want to click the app or anything like that. We literally just want to click on the outside of this bit here, which just says project.android. We're going to click OK to that, and we're going to trust the project, and then we're going to come to our first problem. I'm going to close that, and then we should get some sort of a little bit of a build error. Oh, it's doing the build. Okay, just relax, let it do its own thing, and there we come to our first problem here. And the first problem is our Gradle versions are too low for Flamingo. Now, if you're using Chipmunk, once you've installed it and that, you can use this version here for the plugins and the Gradle version of 6.5. We're using the latest one, so we're going to upgrade, or it's saying 7.2. Our Gradle, we're going to use 7.2, and our Android Gradle plugin, we're going to use of 7.10. So the way that we're going to do that is we are literally going to come up to the file here, and we're going to say project structure, and we should have this here. It says project, and we're going to change that up to 7.10. There we are. And then, as it suggests from the older version there, we're going to move that up to 7.2. 7.2, there we are. You can check out and test other versions and that, but that seems to work for me here. So we're going to apply that, and then just relax again, let it do its Gradle builds and stuff in the background. Be very patient with it, don't stop anything, and then we should be ready to rock and roll. Now, by default, when I installed this brand new, if I click on this button here, it says device managers. This is what's been installed at the moment, default, a Google Pixel, and I guess it's running an 8664 processor. I believe Androids run on ARM, but hey ho. Okay, so we're getting through now. Just be very, very patient, let it do its thing, don't force it, don't stop it. Don't press anything else. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, it can be a bit, you know, time consuming, but it is doing a lot of work in the background. It's also putting the intelligence in as well. So it's picking up from all the libraries and that. So when we type something, we've got our intelligence there. And already it's saying about 32, and we need 64-bit, but we're going to show you how to do that later. Not yet, we're just literally letting it do its thing for the first time. Oh, it's installing various packages still. All right, I'll let that run through. I'll pause it and I'll come back at the end. Oh no, we're there. I don't need to. And there we are. We're done yet? No, it's updating the symbols link. That's the last bit. And then we should be ready to rock and roll. Now I'm just going to ignore that. All right. No, here we are, the indexing of all the APIs and stuff. Right, we should be there now, that's it. Okay, now everything's all lit up and ready to go. So let's press the run button. Oh dear, but only supports. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cancel that, because now we have another problem. It's moaning about, because of I'm trying to, as I said, I'm trying to run an ARM processor on my system. If I plugged my device in, which I will do in a minute, and I'll wake it up, what it's moaning about is by default it installed this, which is an 8664, and I'm trying to run it on my system, which is obviously an Android system there, a genuine one. But it wants me to use this 8664 because it's quicker, but it's nowhere near anything a real device and that. But we'll come back to that later. I will tell you the pitfalls of using virtual devices versus hardware. But for now, let's fix this problem. And the way that we're going to do that is we're in here. There's a tab here which says Android. We're already in Android. And we want to click on these Gradle scripts here because we're going to build it just for the sake of the emulation and keep it happy. And we're going to do that through the Gradle properties here. So we're simply going to double click on that, and then we're going to come down to the prop builds. And as you can see, there's an example here. I wanted it for that. It's saying, hey, you want this 86, what have you. Well, we can copy that. We can comment out that and put that instead. Now this will build for both ARM and the ARM64 and the 86. Now once you've done that, you should see this come up saying sync. If it doesn't say sync there, you always need to sync because this is a Gradle prop. Yeah, so let's ignore that now. It shouldn't really build. We've still got this small error up here. So now we need to sync what I've just done. And I can either do that here with this elephant thing that says sync the project, or I can do it through here, which says sync with Gradle. I'm just going to click the little elephant thing here, let it sync, and then you'll see that this will disappear, and now it's ready to run and compile. See that? Now it's all completely happy. All right, so we'll get that to compile and run on the emulation. I'll pause it and we'll come back at the end because it takes a minute or two to build. Okay, should be getting there nearly now. Did not succeed, could not install, no matching. What? I don't muck around. Failed to launch. Come on. What are you doing? Oh, it hasn't finished building yet. The Gradle still. What's it doing? I think it's because I hit the unpause on the thing. It's sending it a bit mental. Right, let's let it finish building. Sorry about that. That's my fault. Ignore that. I'll pause it again until we get to the end, and then it should be running on there. All right, so we've got to the end of it. Now it's just installing it onto the system, and there we are. There we have our hello world on our device. So is there any way we can turn that around? There we are. It's looking a bit whiter than ever. Let's rerun that. I'm going to press this button here and rerun it. It should have a black background. I know what's going on there. Right. Okay, well there you are. That's it running. So there's a hello world on a Pixel 3a apparently on emulation. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to hardware. So I'm going to stop that and stop that up here. Stop it all. Get rid of that. And we're going to move on to a physical device. So we're going to plug one of those in and we'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so let's get it running on a hardware device. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to bring up my own device. Hello. And what we need to do is we need to get our device into a developer mode. This is an Android T505 model, I think. Not the greatest. It's a A7 or something pad. But we're going to get this into developer mode. And the way that we do that on most devices is if you click onto the settings, and we're going to scroll down to the bottom here. We're going to go about the tablet or device or what have you. We're going to go to software information, and then there should be a thing that says build number. if you keep tapping it, as you can see, it changes. Put in your pin, and now if we go back to the menu, you'll see that it says developer options there. I'm going to click on the developer options. That's already on, and we need to move down to where it says USB debugging, and that's for this lead here. So we're going to simply click that on, say OK, totally allow it. Now when I plug this in, the compiler, Android Studio, should get a little thing. Here we are, we're getting loads of music, setting up the pad, and then somewhere in here, if I look under physical devices, oh no, sorry, let's go back to my thing, because it's now asking a question about, do you want to allow USB debugging from this port or what have you. We're going to say always allow and say allow, and then hopefully coming over to Android Studio, and there it is. There's the Samsung T505. Now we're ready. If I close the thing there, we're now ready to deploy it straight onto hardware debug mode. So if I come to the run test and have it selected, you'll see now on the hardware there that we're running the hello world, and that's it. If I come back here and want to stop it, I can stop it, I can rerun it again, and that's all there is to it, so running on the hardware. Now as you can see on there, we had a small problem on the emulation that things were white, and they shouldn't be like that. So if I actually stop that and click on here and go to here, it was white before. Now if I run it again on the emulation here, you see how it went white? Oh no, now it's coming up black. So you can see that there's a little bit of difference between hardware and emulation. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to a little talk of emulation versus hardware, because of I don't want you going wrong and having the same pitfalls that I've had, because it's cost me weeks and weeks of programming and trying to figure out what's gone on, and it's only really simple things that have happened. So let's move on to that topic of emulation v hardware right now. So let's have a quick chat with emulation versus hardware and some of the pitfalls. As you could see earlier on, this ROM wasn't fully initializing and it looked like it was running. I think it was doing a startup screen there, but there was some sort of hiccup there where we had a white background and we had the Cocos logo. Whereas when I ran it straight onto our hardware here instead of our virtual device, it picked it up straight away. So if I run that now, you can see it's pretty instant to run it. So I'll restart it. You see that's pretty instant. So I'll click run again, deploying it, and it's running on hardware. So let's stop that and let's now run it on the emulation. So as you can see, it's about the same time. So are you saving yourself any time by really running it on emulation? I'll let you decide that one. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the inconsistencies with running emulation versus the hardware there. If we click on this SDK manager, you will see that there are many different versions of Android, and this is how we progressed up until 13 now, is it? Or I don't know where we are there. But you know, they're all different ROMs and various different emulators that you're running, and they all come with their own small differences in that rather than the hardware. And some of the problems that I've had with one of them was, and this was particularly with iOS, was I think at the beginning here in the Hello World scene, I'd written some code and then I'd commented it out, or I'd removed the code, and you can see where this return true is. This is a function that needs to return something, a ball. It needs to return true or false. Now if I try and run that on the emulator, now I've already looked at this, it will run fine. Well, it won't, it will crap out. Why is it running fine on the emulator? No, it didn't, it crapped out. That's good, that's what it's supposed to do. What happened there? Let me run that again. Just give that a double check. Okay. Right, yeah, that's it. It should be crapping out just like that because we're not returning anything. But if I look at the build here, I'm also not getting any errors. A lot of compilers will say, hey, you know, said that you wanted to return something here, but you're not returning anything. But that's fine. But sometimes the emulator will work perfectly, and it did. It worked absolutely brilliantly. I had no problems. I'd done 2 weeks of work. I put many, you know, classes in and bits and pieces and variables and everything. And then I thought, right, I better test it on the hardware. I went and put it on the hardware. And then when I went to run it on the hardware here, it crapped out just like that. But on the emulator, it was working fine. And I couldn't work out what's gone wrong. And as you can see, the compiler's not giving me any errors, saying you're meant to be returning something but not. And this went on, and it took me about 2 weeks to go and look for all of this code, and then I finally got to this bit and I found out I was missing the return true right at the very beginning. I think it's because I used a tile map here or something or other, and as I deleted that out and moved it to a different class, I obviously took that with it or deleted it. I don't know, it's strange. 2 weeks it took me to discover what's gone on. As I said, it was working fine in the emulator. So every so often I would suggest to you, compile to hardware. You know, compile to emulation, fine. Do it, you know, a few times, but every so often compile it over to the hardware so you don't come into these pitfalls and what have you. Another example of what happened to me as well is I was doing audio stuff, and on the emulator the audio was absolutely perfect. Yeah, and then all of a sudden I was compiling to it and the audio had stopped. No idea why. No sound now coming from the EMU and that. I again went hunting around my code to try and figure out what's gone on. Couldn't figure it out. Then I think I accidentally unplugged my hardware and plugged it back in at some point, and the compiler picked up the hardware, and then when I clicked compile, I accidentally compiled to the hardware, and guess what? Sound was working perfect. Not a problem with it. I then tested all the different formats: WAV file, OGG, MP3, was it AM4 or what have you, and it played all of them flawlessly on the hardware. However, when you go back to the emulation, doesn't play. Have no idea what's going on, but as I said, it's all these ROMs work slightly differently because they're emulated. So as I said, sorry about that, what I would do, just to make sure you're safe and everything's working, because we're meant to be compiling for actual hardware, not an emulator. We're not making this for an emulator. I don't know anyone, unless you're running MAME or something, you know, but even then they're not making new games for an emulator, not as far as I know. We're making it for the actual hardware. So yeah, there are my pitfalls and that. Got lost a couple of times because the emulator is telling me lies. So as I said, be careful, don't get into that situation. Compile to the emulator is what I'd say. Compile it a few times there, and every so often compile it on hardware to make sure you don't get stuck where I was. And that's about it really. So that's the pitfalls for emulation v hardware. We shall now move on. Okay, so that just about wraps it up for this part of the tutorial. We've Android and Cocos2dx, by now you should be able to install everything that you need to get your first project running using these settings here. Which is in your file and project structure. You set them there, and also going into the Gradle properties of this Android Studio tab. Yeah, the Gradle scripts here, the Gradle properties, and installing this prop here, just here, commenting out this one. This will include to compile to ARM and the 86 for the emulator, because by default it wants you to install an 86 because it's quicker, but we're really running hardware which is ARM. So you should be able to have a project compiled now to the emulation and also to the hardware, which you can see in the top left hand corner. So if you like what you see, then hit the like button and subscribe if you like. Yeah, I said it. And we'll see you in the next one, where we're going to be taking a little tour of the compiler, because of all of this looks like there's a hell of a lot of it, but really we're only going to be using about 10% of it all of the time. So don't get too disheartened by all of this stuff. We'll get to that in the next tutorial. So see you in the next one, and bye for now.